So we like to just keep this pretty informal and just kind of get everybody's thoughts on the way things have gone this year in general, and what you've learned, and how this is kind of changing education for maybe the long run. And so that's kind of our premise to talk about. And like I said, if you just kind of all, want to keep an eye on, whose mic goes off, that person might be the one to chime in next, and we'll do our best to kind of, each continue the conversation. So I just wanted to start off with very general. What is it like to be a teacher during a global pandemic? Anyone want to begin?
I'll go ahead if nobody else wants to jump in first. I would say that early on it was a challenge, just getting used to, especially in March last year when we were kind of just thrown into the whole thing, getting used to not having our students in front of us. I think that was very difficult. And then as we came back to school this year, I think one of the big things has been the uncertainty. You never know from day to day who's going to be in your class. There's always that question of maybe whether you won't be at school the next day because, you might get shut down, things like that. But the uncertainty, sort of has changed into like a sense of normalcy almost. We kind of deal with things and issues as they come up throughout the course of the day, the week, the year.
Yeah, that adaptation has been so key this year. Who else wants to share just a little bit about their general experience teaching during the pandemic? Mrs. Govey, what's it been like for you?
Hi. Yeah, I agree with Mr. Evans. It's definitely been challenging, but yet we're just so grateful. We've actually been in school the whole time in my district. So that's been so awesome. The uncertainty is still there, but at least having that consistency and being able to be with my students every day is so important. I just feel like while it's been challenging, I do have some online students as well. So juggling both at times can be a little difficult, and learning new technology. I never thought that I would ever say that I am a Google certified teacher. So that has definitely changed the way that, I teach, I think. So you definitely can teach an old dog new tricks. So it's been challenging, but it's also been very rewarding.
That's great. Yeah, talk a little bit about just the experience of being a teacher. Do you still get joy out of it? Is it gratifying when you're in the situation that you're in right now, when maybe you do have students who are virtual, or you're in the classroom but you're socially distanced, you've got plexiglass? What's that been like?
I think that, go ahead.
Okay. So you brought up the plexiglass, and I know that was one of the big things right away. We started getting in the habit of seeing the students through the plexiglass and going up to them, and even just passing back papers at the first time, or even when we were trying to get everyone logged into Google Classroom and everything like that, you would walk around and try to make sure that they're all there. Some people, we've referred to it as the fish bowls as we walk up to them, because they are so secluded, and it kind of takes away that attachment to the students when you try to build the rapport with them. And I mean, starting out the year, just not really having that and having that disconnect was pretty challenging at first. I'll say this is my third year teaching, and never did I think that it was going to turn into this, but adapting, figuring out how to make those changes. It's not just repeating the same things that you're used to and doing it. It's definitely, I mean, in a way for me, exciting, because I am having to find new materials to use. How am I going to do this for both virtual students and the students that are in school as well?
Mm-hmm. Mr. Lithgow, what were you going to say?
I think my students and I have learned through this to overcome the challenges by looking at every obstacle and turning it into an opportunity. I think that at first it was difficult because we've gone through all three instructional methods. We've been totally remote, we've been face-to-face, we've been on a hybrid schedule. And now at Harrison Central, we're back to face-to-face learning. And it's just getting the students to understand that they have to adapt their method of learning based on whether they're in school that day or whether they're remote. And they have to understand the technology and utilize it to the best of their abilities. And I think they've discovered some things about how technology can make learning more fun for them and more interesting. And I know it's challenged me to take advantage of the different technologies to do an effective job of teaching.
Mhm. Has the technology been reliable for everyone? What's that been like? Certainly there must have been some students or parents of elementary age students that had difficulty or other obstacles with technology. Anyone have a story about that?
Well, I can talk a little bit about that. I'm from Toronto, and when we went on remote almost a year ago, in March, April, and May, oh, they were terrible. Like, because we weren't ready for that. We weren't ready for that with the technology either, and we didn't have, everybody didn't have a way to get on. And at that time, we didn't really have to or require our second graders to get on every day. And so we were sending home paper packets, and I was delivering them to houses, and I was picking up work, and we used our phones, and they were sending me pictures, and they were texting me, and I gave them out my phone number, and it was 24/7. So those 3 months were difficult to say the least. But then this year, once we got our Chromebooks and all of our kids got them, and they were able to then take them home if we had to go remote. And we were able to teach them in the classroom how to get on the Google Classroom and how to get on Google Meet and how to get on their math website and their reading website so that we could do those things together. It was much easier this year. Mm-hmm. And I think the students and the parents and the teachers, we all learned tons more technology than we ever thought we would.
That is for sure. It's hard. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, as parents, your technology, it's been a real eye-opener with the young 6-year-olds getting their own iPad and teaching them how to get their email and log into my team. That's what we do here in the Teams meetings. And I mean, they did that faster quickly, but then they message you at 1 in the morning with a bunch of JKLMNOD because they learn how to text, and they're not getting like supervised because they've got an iPad with them all the time. They were in school, and so we got a lot of those. They've learned how to mute us when we're in meetings. They've learned how to take kids out of meetings and they can't get back in. So that's been a real struggle with our technology. The kindergarten side. But for the most part, I mean, those are just some of the horror stories. But the good, the positives, they are really good with technology. I'm 6 years old now. I mean, they can do anything, really.
That is great.
I have a little bit of different experience with technology, at least. You have to be flexible because of all of the glitchiness you can see from, this kid loses their signal because they may be using a cell phone signal, or they may be using, Wi-Fi that's unreliable or whatever. But at least they're there. The problem I have as a science teacher is there's so much lost in the hands-on piece, and that's been a real struggle for me because I was one of the techier teachers at Toronto, so we were doing a lot of the face-to-face and things like that last year, but to come in this year and struggle with where I would have normally do a hands-on lab that's very rich and the kids understand things. Sometimes when they go through virtual labs, they feel like they're playing a game. Mm-hmm. And they don't take the actual oh wait, that's the science. The science gets lost in this feeling of playing a video game sometimes. And so for at least me, that's been a struggle this year.
Yeah. So are they still getting the education they need, or has that barrier really impeded on their learning process?
I guess we'll find out. I mean, we're gonna have to wait and see how well we perform on like a state test in comparison with other things. You know, you kind of have to again be flexible, try to find like you would not believe the amount of time I've spent trying to find labs that are very similar, virtual labs that are similar to things I would do in the classroom. But it's just not always out there. Or sometimes, you know, that's what science is. Science is learning by trial and error and hands-on. And sometimes those virtual lab experiences just don't, that piece gets lost.
I can only imagine. Yeah. And Mrs. Carnes, I wanted to ask about your experience with special education students. What has this been like trying to teach in this environment?
I think my kids, especially, they've actually done pretty well. Like my parents, they work really well with me. We communicate with one another. Some of my students, if they weren't able to complete some of the stuff on the iPad, we made sure they had paper packets to be able to complete everything that needs to be completed. But overall, like I think the technology piece was huge. You know, Hancock County Schools, I think, did a really great thing by making sure that everybody had an iPad this year. So technology was not an issue. Like now they may not have internet, but we have hotspots all throughout town that they can go to be able to use those devices. And we're using those same devices during school hours, which I think is another great piece because these kids, that's what they're using, you know, every day. These kids know how to do more with technology than any of us. You know, I have 2 kids at home as well, and, you know, they can do far more. They're much more resilient than we give them credit for. They're wearing masks all day long. I never thought that my kindergartner was going to be able to go to school and wear a mask all day, covering her nose, everything. They're doing fantastic. And, you know, we have to thank the parents because these parents, you know, it's difficult. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know how they're working. And they're also trying to make sure that these kids are getting their assignments done. You know, I applaud them because I think it's tough. I think it's really tough.
And one of my questions was going to be, what do you wish the parents knew about schooling from your perspective? Or what is it that you want them to know? This, as you know, as far as you've come this year, what is it that you want the parents to know? Any thoughts on that?
That we're all in this together. We have to do it together. We have to have patience with each other and understanding and cooperation. Especially in the age of I teach, there's a lot of frustration because some of these kids are working in school, in preschool. This is what is normal. To go to school 2 days a week, wear a mask all day, and not do all these practice at home. They don't know 5 days a week. And I mean, that's that. And parents, they do know what it's like. They have more kids. They want their kids in school 5 days a week. And we totally understand that. We love them here too. But we just have to have a lot of patience to understand each other.
And Mrs. Hall, just so you know, you are pretty glitchy with your audio. I don't know if there's any kind of easy troubleshooting. I'm making out what you're saying, but it's just not perfectly clear. But I just wanted to mention that.
What? Can you hear me now?
I can, it's still a little glitchy.
Well, I can't be in school because I don't have Wi-Fi in my house. So,
Well, we appreciate it. Yeah, like I said, we can hear you just good enough, but we're glad to have you either way. So thank you, and I love the backdrop with the little snowman and whatnot. It looks cute. What else? What about working with parents, communicating with parents, and just families? It has been like Mrs. Hall said, we're all in this together. This has been probably the biggest team effort or community effort that we've ever seen. Any other thoughts on that?
I think, like you said, communication has been key, especially with the students that are full-time remote. It's been one of those things where, we've had to reach out to parents more than we ever have before, just to make sure, that they know, hey, your son or daughter's doing doing this amount of their work. And, it's just been, without being able to see the kid face to face and like sit them down at the desk and make sure that they're working, we've had to communicate with parents a lot more. Now, we've been really lucky because we've been all but 5 days, we've been face to face, the whole time. But we do have a certain percentage of our students that have been remote, since the beginning of the year. So I think that's been the biggest challenge with teachers and parents, I think, is that whole communication, especially with the students that are remote, and just like everybody said, understanding that we're all in it together. They get frustrated and we get frustrated, and we just got to make sure that we're communicating so that we know that we're all on the same side in the long run.
One of the big things that I think is important is that like you can't replace the classroom setting with the virtual learning. I always wondered what it was like for those online schools, and if someday computers could ever take over and do our jobs like they have with other jobs. But I have definitely seen now that I don't think that that's really a possibility, because there's so much more that we do than just teach those students. And with that being said, and we've been face to face this whole year, but we do have students that have been exposed to someone that's positive. So then they have to leave for 2 weeks out of our classroom. And then a few days later, another one has to leave for 2 weeks, and someone comes back, and then another one has to leave for 2 weeks. So what we started doing is we just open up our Google Meet every day. And even those people that are home quarantined, they just join our classroom virtually every day so that they get that, so I can see them face to face, and they're sort of still part of our classroom, and they're still getting the teaching from me, and they still see everything that's going on in the board, and I can turn around and they can interact and have the discussion with the other students and still feel like socially and emotionally connected to our classroom, even though they have to quarantine for a couple weeks. So I think that's a good thing about that, and a good outcome, positive outcome that's come out of all of this.
Yeah, that's great. Ms. Blazek, you were going to say something as well.
I was actually going to talk about a lot of the same thing Jen was, the flexibility required on everyone's part to have to deal with that constant, like, this group of kids is quarantined and they may be on their first or second quarantine, and then the wave pattern of it all. And I've, like Jen's been doing, having, if we hear a group of students is quarantined, all of a sudden there's a Google Meet or a Zoom link on my Google Classroom, and every day those kids are on the screen interacting. And if we're even doing group work, I'll throw them into breakout rooms with their peers and with members of the class, just so that they can get that normal interaction and group work and feel consistently a member of the class, no matter how many times they've been in and out, or no matter what the next day will bring. Because that's the thing, like, one day you can just walk in and half your class is missing. And so the flexibility required for students to make sure that they stay up to date, and the teachers and the administration to get all of that together, like, it's quite amazing that we've all, along with the community, has been able to handle it and still do things to the degree we have been.
Mrs. Toby, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of go along with Mrs. Matches also and say that with my remote learners online, it's just so important that they feel that they're part of our classroom community. So, being able to Zoom them every day and, put them with partners, put them in, a cooperative learning group is so important that they feel connected, and these kids miss their friends, they miss their teachers. So it's really important that we try to keep some sort of line of, communication open with them and make them feel that they're like really part of the classroom. So I wanted to just share that too.
Mr. Walker.
Thanks. So I would jump in on all of that as well. And as far as the divide between the students that are virtual and still logging in, the live classes, watching all of that. I specifically did notice some of the things too, where if some students did go virtual, their grades would start to drop at times and they weren't as engaged in classes, things like that. But when they would return, they would improve by so much. So I definitely am a proponent of being in the classroom still, at least attending the live classes, just having some kind of tangible way to reach out to the students still and speak with them and still help as much as we can.
Anybody have any concerns, either concerns about, like you were saying, the students in terms of performance, in terms of mental health? What about your own physical health? Any concerns to mention that you've been kind of dealing with this year?
I can share just something with you all. I do have like some concerns. I'm a parent as well as a teacher, and my son was diagnosed last year with type 1 diabetes. So that is a huge concern for me, for him this year. So, we had to take him out of school. He started the year, but then we just felt like COVID really started ramping up. So we had to take him out, and he's online right now. And, just his health is such a big concern, for me as a parent. So, there are, concerns there with him, but he's, online and doing well right now. And our hope is, hopefully here in the next quarter, maybe that he can go back. So it's definitely a scary time, for parents and kids and teachers too. So
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, hopefully everything, works out with him, and you've definitely got a lot on your mind and in your heart right now, for sure.
thanks.
Just like everyone. What has this taught us about the future of education? I think we touched a little bit on the fact that in-person learning is so important. Are there things we've learned that are going to shape education for the rest of our lives?
I think that the technology is obviously not going to go away, and it's going to get better in the future. And hopefully we get over this and things do return to normal again. But the technology that I've learned and the ways to use it and to be more effective in using it, that's still a wide open door. And it's going to remain open because, as I said, the technology is going to improve. We're going to be able to do things 10 years from now that we have no idea we can do today. So this is kind of let us know that, you have to adapt, you have to embrace change, you have to incorporate the ideas that you learn. I know as an older teacher, sometimes older teachers want to resist new technologies, and we're just trying to bide our time and we won't have to deal with this. We won't have to learn this. Those days are over with now. It's here, it's now. You have to use the technology. You have to learn how to do things and be more creative with the technology. And that's been a good thing. That's not only benefited the teachers, but obviously it's benefited the students as well.
For sure. And I'm not sure if Zoom is going to cut us off here right at 8 or not. So if we do end up cutting out, I just wanted to thank you all so much, again, just for joining us tonight, sharing your thoughts, and then for the role you're playing in the classrooms and in so many lives. But until we get cut off, anyone have any other thoughts that they wanted to share tonight?
One of the things from a parent's perspective and from a teacher's perspective that I think has really been amazing as to what's going on is we have our 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th graders so that they're in a room all day and their teachers travel around so that they're only exposed to, the kids that are in that room as much as possible. And some of the collaboration stuff that has happened inside those little groups has been amazing. Like my daughter's class, they've got a group chat on on Facebook, they've got group messages, they've got everything going on. They're making quizzes, to help each other. And I'm like, who's telling you to do that? And she's like, well, nobody's telling us to do it. We're just doing it ourselves. And I think there's been some really cool things like that that have came out of this as well. And just, I think that the schools working as hard as they have to get everything in place, in order for education to continue has been huge. I know one of the teachers was talking about the hotspots, set up in the community. We've got hotspots on our buses, and our buses will drive out to, rural areas in Edison local where you can't get internet. In some places you can't even get satellite internet, because it's down in a valley or something like that. And we've had people come to the buses and get their internet. And our support staff as well, like our cafeteria ladies. I mean, they've been packing lunches and sending lunches and breakfasts out, to the entire community all through the early spring last year, all through the summer. And still even now when, we're face to face, they're doing everything they can do to support the community as well. So I think there's been some really positive things that have come out of it as well.
That's awesome. Really cool. Anybody have any funny stories? Anything outrageous happened during some kind of virtual learning, or any funny things that happened?
I can tell you one funny thing. I was Zooming live and just teaching away and was really into my lesson. And I kind of glance over at my computer and I see waving arms, they were just wailing away. And I looked down and I was on mute. So for like 10 minutes and I was, I clicked the button and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. So that happens.
Yep. Oh yeah, that does. Oh, all right. Anyone else have any other stories or thoughts?
Well, that's sort of the opposite that happened to me. I'm teaching and we're having a discussion and I'm asking a question and this one kid wants to answer. So I call on him and he's talking. And I'm like, hey, we can't hear you. I'm like, put yourself, you're on mute, but he's just talking over top of me, talking away. And all of a sudden he finishes. I'm like, sorry, but we can't hear you. You're going to have to unmute yourself and say it again. And so he unmutes himself and says, never mind. He didn't want to say all that again.
Oh, that is too funny. All right. Well,
Jeff, I want to throw in one more thing.
Sure.
I like the question that you asked or that you had in the email saying, what life lessons have we learned through this experience? And I have to say that a lot of the students, maybe not every one of them, but a lot of the students I think have learned through this to realize that life can change in a moment. A lot of times they wish away days and they're already geared towards, summer vacation and getting to their senior year if they're a freshman or a sophomore. And I think that's kind of been halted a little bit. I think that they realize now how quickly future plans can be altered and how life can change. And I think that's, it can be a positive. I think it teaches them to treasure every day and to look at every day as an opportunity to learn. And we've been trying to communicate to them that the biggest reason we fear things is because we lack knowledge about it or we don't understand it. So this pandemic has given us an opportunity to not be as afraid as we could be if we just try to understand it better and we learn more about it. And I think that carries over to life as well.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, that's definitely important, and I think you summed it up so well. All right, everybody. Just so you know, I'm always looking for stories and certainly love to cover school issues. So, please keep me updated. Most of you now have my email and my cell phone, so shoot me a text or keep me updated if you're, doing something new or different, either even in your classroom or the whole school. I know the hotspot buses is something that I've wanted to do a story on. So that's kind of on my list. And just, keep me in the loop. And I can't thank you enough again for giving us your time tonight. Don't worry about the audio issues. Mrs. Hall, like I said, we've got enough of you that I think you had some has some great things to share, and certainly appreciate all of your time and your effort in going in the classroom as well so you could have the internet. So everybody have a great night, and y'all get A's.